Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this video is if you were gone for our matting demonstration or you'd like to watch it again as you are matting for the first time. Our goal is to take our beautiful artwork, which looks possibly like this, and then put a nice frame around it using our mat to get it ready to showcase in an art show or just to make it nice to frame. So, this is what you need. You need a ruler, you need a pencil. It's helpful to take a look at the steps before you begin. This will be posted on the wall for you in the mat cutting room right next to the paper cutter. So please check this out as you're going if that's something of aid to you. So the first step is actually measuring our artwork. Some of you guys like to develop your artwork all the way from edge to edge, like you see here in this little ladybug drawing. Some of you guys, when you make your artwork, you don't work it all the way to the edge, which is just fine as well. You're going to have areas of unwanted painting that you're either going to cut or crop out when you go to mat it. So when you measure your artwork to mat, what's going to happen is we are actually going to be measuring the inside frame first. Okay, so this inside cut. Now, if you are an artist who goes from edge to edge like this ladybug drawing, you want to be careful because the first mistake that I come across and see as a teacher is I'll have students come in, they'll grab their ruler and they'll measure it like this. And they'll put the ruler right on the edge of the paper and they'll say, oh, my paper is 6 inches wide and it is 6 inches tall, which is the first mistake because we are measuring the window of the mat. So if this window is 6 by 6 and the paper is 6 by 6, this paper is actually going to fall through the mat. We want to have some sort of overlap between the mat and the artwork so the paper can't fall through. Okay, so when we go to measure it, what we're going to do is instead of measuring the width of the paper, we are going to pull our measurement a little bit in from the side. Okay, I like to go for a good 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so if you're looking at your ruler, here's an inch. You divide that in half, here's a half. If you divide that in half again, here's a 1/4. So this distance between the pencil tip and the edge of the ruler is about how much I want to come in from the edge of the paper or the edge of the drawing. Okay, so if I start measuring from right here and I go across, same thing on this far side, I'm not measuring to this tick mark because that's right on the paper edge. I want to come a little bit in. So perhaps I go for the width of 5 1/4, which would be right here on my ruler for the width. Okay, so I want to write that down so I don't forget what it is. Actually, that's not 5 1/4, that's 5 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 3/8, 1, 2, 3 little marks. So on the back, I'm going to write that down and do 5 3/8, like so. Okay, then I measure it from top to bottom. I'm not lining the ruler up with the edge of the paper, I'm pulling it a little bit in. And then I'm measuring down, not to the edge of the paper, but a little bit in. So perhaps instead of taking 5 3/8 like I did widthwise, I want to do 5 4/8, which would round down to 5 1/2. And this is my measurement on the ruler. I'm going to record that on the back. 5 1/2. Okay? Now, if you are working with a piece of artwork where you didn't use the whole paper, okay? So, for example, here, the painter didn't come all the way up to the edge because they were planning on cropping it out when they matted it anyway. So you were not measuring all the way to the top. Okay, so let's say I want to crop it right here. I would mark that off to the side. Okay, on the paper. Same thing here at the bottom. If I don't want to come all the way down to the base, where do I want this to be cropped? Let's say I want to crop it about right here. And then I'm measuring the distance between this top mark and this bottom mark to find the opening of that inside of the mat. So that's an exact 13 inches. I'm going to write that right here on the back, 13. Okay. Same thing with the width. Okay, if I don't want the whole width of the painting, let's say I want to crop it about right here, mark it. Okay, you can draw on your artwork, you can draw on the table, whatever works for you works for me. And let's say I want to crop it about right there, mark it, and then measure between those two marks to see how big your inside window will be. And let's say I'm going to go for 11 inches. I'm starting at my first mark, measuring, going across to my tick mark. And if it's hard for you to do little fractions with 8s or halves or 4s, just round it to the closest inch. Okay, so I'm going to round mine to 11. So 13 is my first dimension, 11 is my second dimension. Okay, now our mat that we're going to be cutting is 2 inches on every single side. So we're going to have to do a little math problem. This is the inside measurement of the window that we're going to cut, but now we need the outside measurement. So we're going to add 13 plus 2 plus 2. Okay, 2 plus 2 is 4, so we're going to add 4 to my 13. And then widthwise, we have 11 plus 2 plus 2. We're going to add 4 to my 11, do a little bit of math, and my outside dimension is going to be 17 by 11. Okay, so when I'm going to cut at the cutting table, I'm going to now start by cutting this outside frame, which is 17 by 11, and then later I'm going to come in and cut my inside frame, which will be a 13 by 11. Oh, excuse me, 15 17 by 15, and 13 by 11. Okay, so let's move to the cutting table and cut it. This is the end of part 1. Okay, part 2 happens over here on the cutting board. So let me show you where things are. We're going to need the cutting board. We're also going to need some mat board. So we keep small sheets of mat board under our mat cutting table, which looks like this. Okay, I want you to check here to make sure that these are too small for your measurement. If one of these does work with what you're trying to cut, then use this first. Then you're going to come back here. There's some larger pieces. You're going to go to this second to see if anything over here will match or fit your dimensions that you just measured for your outside measurement. If that doesn't fit, then you're going to dive into these boxes of new, fresh mat board. Okay, and you're going to grab a whole sheet to work with for this next step. Okay, so the next step happens over here on the cutting board. So you're going to grab your mat board, bring it over, and we're actually going to use the ruler on this cutting table for the rest of the measurement. So you can see that there is some markings on the top of our cutting table. Now our cutting table is old. I want to point out that it's missing a bolt right here, which means that this ruler is not completely straight. So when you are measuring and lining things up here on the cutting board, you have to use these grid lines because the grid lines are straight but the ruler is not. Okay, so I'm here on my cutting table. I have my artwork. My dimensions are calculated on the back. I'm cutting a 17 by 15 here on the cutting board. I'm starting from the outside and I'm working in. So I do need to make sure that my final product is 17 by 15. So placing my mat board on my cutting table, I'm going to use my ruler at the top to cut my dimension of 17. So pay attention, it's backwards up here at the top. Here's my 17. I'm going to line it up with the grid right at 17, and I'm going to cut part way down on my cutting board. Now, I'm only cutting part way right now because I am using a full sheet of mat board, and if I back out my camera, I want you to notice that it's hanging off of the table. Okay? Because my mat board is bigger than my cutting table, if I cut my blade all the way down, it's going to rip my mat board. Okay, my mat board is about $15 a piece, so we want to try to save as much of it as we can and keep it nice. So in order to prevent that, what I've discovered is if you only cut 3/4 of the way down, it actually makes a cleaner cut. So let me show you what that looks like. I align it at 17. Okay, I hold my mat board here so it doesn't fall off the table, and then I slice it 3/4 of the way down and lift up. Okay, the rest of the board I'm then going to prop up on this metal beam up here at the top to hold it for me, which will let me fit the rest of the board on the table, reline it up with the grid lines to keep it straight, and finish my cut. Okay, what's here on the board, this is what I'm keeping. The part that's hanging off is my scraps, so I put my scraps back for somebody else to use. Okay, and then I repeat with my second dimension. So that was 17, check it again, I'm doing 17 by 15. Pull it up, line it up. Okay, now this blade is very sharp. It will cut everything in its path, including your clothing, if you're wearing anything drapey, including your hair, if you have long hair, and your fingers. So you have to be sure that everything is clear of the blade. You are not allowed to cut your fingers off in this room, ever, okay? I do not give you permission. So make sure everything is clear from the blade before you chomp down, okay? And then I have my perfect 15 by 17 piece of mat board. All right, next step is drawing your inner cut before we move to the mat cutting table. So before we do any drawing, though, you want to decide here at this point, do I want a black mat or do I want to flip it over and use the white side of the mat board? Okay, so you get to pick and choose. Now, if you do choose white, obviously, you don't want to use the part of the mat board that has the print. So I actually have no choice in this matter because I picked the wrong side of the mat board. There's only one section on the entire sheet that has printing, so if you do want white, don't pick the side that I picked. Okay, so I am going to have a black frame when I'm finished, and I do like how that looks with a black frame. So I'm doing all my drawing on the back of what I want to show in the end. So I'm going to draw on my white side. We have to draw in 2-inch borders. So there's 3 ways you can do this. First way, using your ruler, you can mark 2 inches in from the side. So line it up with the edge, there's 2 inches in. I do the same up at the top, 2 inches in, and I just simply connect my dots. Okay, that's option 1. Okay, option 2, you can create a template. So you can pop over here to the cutting table, grab a piece of scrap mat board, and cut a 2-inch strip. Line it up with the 2 on the top of the ruler, being careful not to have your fingers in the way, and cut a template. Okay, that's perfectly 2 inches across. I could take that back to where I'm working. If I don't like to measure things, I'm not a math person, line it up with the edge of my mat board and simply trace to get a perfect 2 inches across on my side, okay? Third option, you can take your mat board with you to the mat cutter. So we're going to walk over here to our mat cutter, which looks like this. And we can do measuring back here at the mat cutter. So how this mat cutter works, there is also a ruler that we can use, okay, right here. This can be set at different widths. So you're going to lift up on this black handle and set it aside. You're going to loosen this black screw so it can slide. Okay? You're going to set not this bar, but this little black hook. Okay, it's like a little captain hook that points down at the ruler. You want to make sure that this hook right here aligns with 2 inches. Make sure it's straight, following your grid lines. And then tighten it. Don't forget to tighten it down right here so it doesn't shift back and forth. Okay? Once it's set at 2 inches, you can actually use this to draw your border. Okay, this is option 3. So you're going to slide your artwork in, put the arm back down, and just trace it. Turn it, line it right up against this arm, trace it. So you have a perfect 2 inches drawn on all 4 sides. Okay, at this point you have to stop and grab your artwork and bring it to either me or Miss Funnel, or whoever your art teacher is, and you're going to lay your artwork on top like so, and you're going to say, look, did I do this correctly? And what we're checking for is to make sure that your corners overlap into these squares that we drew. You can see. Okay, we want to make sure that it overlaps into the square. If it doesn't, your mat board is too big and we need to fix it before we cut the inner rectangle. Okay? If you mess up at this stage, we can catch almost all of your mistakes at this stage before you cut the inside of the mat. So you want to check it with us, especially if it's your first or second time, until you get the hang of it. Okay? So once you check it with me or Miss Funnel, you are ready to cut this inside rectangle. So how it works is you're going to grab a piece of scrap mat board. Okay, that's really thin. Okay, it looks about like this. These are all underneath the table. They can't be used for artwork because they're too skinny, but we use them for cutting boards. This mat cutter that you're using is fairly old, and it cuts better if you have a cutting board. So you can see this was an old piece that we used from the time before. You don't want an old, icky cutting board. Okay, you want a nice, fresh piece. So I'm throwing this one away because it's cut through and icky. This one's fresh. This is the one I'm going to use. And I'm going to place it right at the base of this metal bar. Okay, so I'm going to lift up the handle and push it right here against this metal bar. Okay, that's my cutting board. Then I'm going to take my artwork, and the artwork always hangs to the right of your mat cutter. So I'm going to slide it in right against that metal beam. Okay, your drawn line should line right up with this black rim if you measured it correctly. Okay, now what's going to happen here is we are going to cut a beveled edge. Okay, and a beveled edge is an edge that's slanty. So you can see here on the sample that there is an angled cut going down, okay? We're trying to cut a little slide into your artwork. Now, there's a couple things that can go wrong, and I have this things that can go wrong example, just to put it on the back of your mind as you're cutting. You don't want to overcut your lines, okay? That's a bad news bear. You don't want to force your corners out or it's going to rip, like you see here on the sample. You don't want to cut too slow or you're going to get these little grooves and ripped edges as well, okay? We're trying to get a nice, clean, smooth, even line. Okay, so how to do that is starting above this line you see here, okay? You want to come in about 1/8 of an inch above, which is something like that. I'm going to enter in my blade right there. I'm going to cut towards my body and exit the blade about right there. So you're going above the line up here at the top, cutting through, and then going below the line here at the bottom, okay? And that ensures that your corners won't stick. The blade is on this moving track, okay? In order to cut it, you have to rock the blade down. So this moves up and down like a seesaw, okay? And it does take quite a bit of force. So, and it takes some muscle to pull it towards you. So it looks like this. Come in, enter in at that arrow, push it all the way down, pull towards my body, and release it when I get to that second arrow. I'm going to remove it from the mat board and make sure that it cut all the way through. And then I'm going to repeat. I'm going to rotate it so the board is hanging to the right off the mat table. Slide it in right up against this metal bar. I'm going to start above this line, so here's my new entry point, and then I'm going to exit the blade past the line about right there. Okay, so I repeat. Enter it in, push down, pull towards my body, exit the blade. And you do want to try to do it in one even cut. Okay, check to make sure it opened up. The biggest mistake I see students make when they're cutting is they do it with glitches. like this. They'll enter it in, they'll cut some, they'll stop, they'll cut some, they'll stop, they'll cut some, and you're kind of pulsing it as you cut. That can rip and make teared edges. Okay, so you want to try to do it one fluid, even swoop if you can, until you cut all 4 sides, and the inside drops out. Okay, so there's my mat. The inside is cut. My scraps go under the table, because somebody else could use that if they're doing a small little drawing. Okay, then we're going to take this back to the table and tape it to our art. Okay, so I'm all trimmed and ready to go. Your next decision is where are you going to move this mat? Okay, do I want it to go a little bit higher? Do I want it to go a little bit lower? This can actually change your composition, especially if you're working on putting a focal point in your rule of thirds. If you crop this too high, too low, to the right, to the left, it can actually push this out of your rule of thirds. So you want to be careful that you're still thinking of those compositional elements when you're matting, okay? So I don't want my eyes to be right in the middle. I want it to be a little bit above, let's say, my center part, just for compositional reasons. So let's say I like it right there, okay? Now, at this point, it's hard to flip it around without shifting it. So my trick is I will take my artwork, pull it a little bit off the table, hanging on to the artwork so it doesn't shift the mat, okay? Then, grabbing a little bit of masking tape, I like to tack it on one small area. So just a little piece, like so. I'll bend down under the table, tape a small section so it doesn't move when I flip it, and then I can turn it over without it shifting, okay? Now, when you tape this to the back of your mat, you gotta use a lot of tape, okay? So you're gonna frame it completely, top to bottom, left to right. When this goes to an art show, we do not want any chance for fingers to get underneath the artwork or between the artwork and the mat, or it can with your painting. Okay, so you're taping it all the way around 360. Once you tape it, I like to run my fingernail right here along the edge to make sure it's really stuck on. And when you're completely done, it should look like that on the back, okay? After you tape it on, I like to sign it with pencil so you can read it. Sometimes I'll even put an email or a phone number, or if you have a business card for your artwork, I also like to connect that, because if somebody sees this beauty in an art show and they want to contact the artist to buy it, you want to sell it and get their money. So you want them to be able to find you. So it's not a bad idea to print with pencil on the back your name and perhaps a contact, some sort of contact information for them to find you, okay? And that's our summary on matting. So give it a try, have fun, let me or Miss Funnel know if you need help, and good luck.